Okay, so when you think of British generals in the American Revolution, a few names probably pop in your head, right? Howe, Cornwallis, maybe Burgoyne. But what if I told you the most talented British commander of the whole war was someone you've probably never even heard of?
We're diving into the Southern Campaign, which, let's be honest, one of the most brutal and nasty parts of the entire war. And smack in the middle of it was a young, ambitious, and just ruthlessly effective British officer.
Look, this isn't just some modern hot take. The legendary British Army historian Sir John Fortescue looked back at all the famous generals from that time and he singled out this one guy. His assessment was pretty simple. He was the ablest of all.
So that raises the big question, doesn't it? If one of the top military historians ever says this guy was the best of the best, why is Lord Rawdon basically a historical footnote today? To figure that out, we've got to go back to the beginning.
Francis Rawdon wasn't some guy who worked his way up from the bottom. Nope. He was born into a world of immense privilege and power. His career path seemed pretty much set from day one, a high-stakes role right at the heart of the British Empire's military machine.
I mean, just look at this timeline. His early life was a total whirlwind. He joins the army when he's just 16, goes to Oxford, and by the time he's 20 years old, he's on a ship sailing straight for Boston, and he gets there just as the whole place is about to explode.
And he definitely looked the part. People who were around him back then described him as having this really commanding presence. He was serious, he was dedicated, and he just gave off this soldierly air. For him, this wasn't just a job. He absolutely loved the profession of arms.
So after getting his first taste of combat in those early battles around Boston and New York, Rawdon gets his real test down in the South. What happens is, his boss, Lord Cornwallis, takes the main army and marches north, leaving Rawdon in charge of South Carolina. The only problem? South Carolina was anything but conquered.
His mission was this really complex and incredibly messy strategy they called pacification. Now, you got to understand, this wasn't about winning big, glorious battles. It was this delicate and often pretty brutal balancing act. He was trying to rebuild Loyalist government while at the same time hunting down Patriot fighters. It was a war for control, fought in every swamp and back road.
Yeah, this slide really gets to the core of what that guerrilla war in the South was like. It was this constant chess match for every single move Rawdon made, like setting up Loyalist officials or sending out patrols. The Patriots had a countermove ready to go. They'd spread propaganda, encourage his soldiers to desert, and launch these lightning-fast hit-and-run attacks that kept the entire region on a knife's edge.
And the thing is, Rawdon's job was made almost impossible by what was actually happening on the ground. His own regiment, the Volunteers of Ireland, was deserting constantly. Patriot propaganda was just devastatingly good. They spread rumors like the British were kidnapping young men to sell to German princes. His spy network was leaky, and his Loyalist allies, well, they were often too eager, jumping into fights they couldn't win and getting crushed.
But here is the central paradox of Lord Rawdon. Because even in this totally chaotic, hostile environment, when it came down to a real conventional fight, he was an exceptionally skilled commander. He was actually winning.
The amount of trust his superiors had in him was just immense. I mean, think about it. He's only 26 years old, and Lord Cornwallis basically hands him the keys to the entire British operation in South Carolina. That's a huge sign of respect for his ability.
And you know what? He immediately proved that trust was well placed. In the spring and summer of 1781, he just went on a tear. First, he boldly attacks and defeats a larger American army at Hobkirk's Hill. Then, he marches his forces to break the month-long siege of the key fort at 96, forcing one of the best American generals, Nathanael Greene, to retreat. Rawdon was winning the battles, but the bigger war for control was slowly slipping through his fingers.
So there's absolutely no doubt about it. Those 7 years in America forged him into a really formidable commander. The brutal day-to-day reality of that war was his training ground, and it turned the young aristocrat into a truly seasoned, battle-hardened officer.
But his time in America was coming to a close. He was sick, totally exhausted from the non-stop campaigns, and he decided it was time to go home, leaving just before the final act of the war played out.
His timing was just unbelievable. He sails out of America in August 1781. He missed the pivotal war-ending siege of Yorktown by only a couple of months. He left a war where he'd personally been winning right before his side was about to suffer its biggest, most catastrophic defeat.
But America wasn't the end of his story. Not even close. In fact, you could make a very strong argument that his greatest achievements, both as a military leader and as an administrator, were still ahead of him, just on an entirely different continent.
Decades later, with a fancy new title, the Marquess of Hastings, he becomes the Governor-General of India. And this is where his talents really exploded. He's commanding huge armies, winning decisive wars against the Maratha Confederacy that basically cemented British control over the entire subcontinent. He proved he was more than just a general. He was a powerful administrator, reforming the government and massively boosting the profits of the East India Company. In India, he was a conqueror and an empire builder.
And all of this brings us right back to the central puzzle of Lord Rawdon's American War. He was a brilliant tactician, a winner on the battlefield. But the overall strategy of pacification was a complete failure. His story leaves us with a really fundamental question about war itself. How much do individual victories really matter when even a tactical genius can't overcome a determined popular revolution?